Hello, listeners, and welcome to Godrej Voices podcast, Be All You Can. I'm Narika Holkar, and I'm very glad to host this episode today. We have with us someone whose passion has driven him towards really creating exemplary work in terms of his environmental policy, his advocacy, his science and habitat management, and very importantly, all his work on Project Tiger and really bringing that agenda to the fore. He is the founder of Sanctuary Nature Foundation. He's the editor of Sanctuary Asia, India's first and largest wildlife and ecology magazine, which was set up in 1981. And he's also the founder editor of Sanctuary Club, which was set up 2 years later. India's oldest and the only wildlife magazine for children. His work with Project Tiger since its inception in the 1970s, and also all his writing through magazine articles, books, newspapers in both English and regional languages, has really changed the public mind and especially inspired young and budding children to really take this on and to really further all of his life's work. He has produced 30 wildlife documentaries, led national and international environmental campaigns across media platforms, including social media. So thank you so much for joining us today, Bittu Uncle. The idea of this podcast is really to look at purpose and how it drives people's behavior and, just to celebrate examples of leadership with purpose. And we thought it was very apt for you to join us on the podcast today. And just wanted to ask you a few questions about your journey and also your thoughts on the work that you've done and how we can get the younger folks more interested, engaged in this agenda.
Happily. And when you say young people, include yourself in that, okay?
No, I'm not young anymore.
That's what Miel and Tara tell me, but I know you are.
Yeah, so we were interested as GNB to understand a little bit more about your journey and, what were really your initial motivations that led you in the direction that you've come?
Basically, I was always fascinated by things wild, be they trees or a fallen leaf or a grasshopper or a gecko or an ant or a tiger. It was just one of those things. I don't know. It was a gift, Yes, I was born in Simla and I studied in Simla where there were forests and there was all kinds of things. But somehow or the other, bless my parents, I don't know. I just never got distracted with too many things and I just fell in love with things wild and I needed no other motivation.
Lovely. And if you're thinking of your journey from chartered accountant to advertising, to conservation, how would you describe the different facets of your life and how it added to, your mission of conservation?
Even before my chartered accountancy, I was picked up by the Government College of Sports at the age of 15 to be a wicketkeeper and an opening bat for India. That's what they said. They gave me a scholarship for 3 years. And then my father said, "Are you going to play games all your life?" So he plunked me into a chartered accountant's office. And it's John Lennon's fault. He said that life is what happens to you while you make other plans. And one thing went to the other. I fell in love with my dear wife then, who was just 17 years old. But her father said, "I'm not going to get her married to somebody without a profession." So I wasn't going to do chartered accountancy. The next best profession I thought would be to get into advertising and communication. And I jumped into that and I became a communicator. And because I loved nature and fell in love with it, I'm still a communicator, except my subject is communicating nature and not toothpaste, so that's how it was.
Yeah, I think communication is such an important element of both awareness as well as inspiration. And I think that's also something that we struggle with as an organization in terms of, how do we really communicate effectively and also inspire people. And I think definitely your work is very inspirational. And maybe if we just change focus a little bit to Sanctuary and its evolution. How did you think about the foundation, and was it organic? Was there some external factors which influenced you?
It's actually, again, John Lennon's fault. I mean, what happened was I loved wildlife, and I would keep going back to Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. And there was this man called Fateh Singh Rathod, who was the first field director. And years and years of just living in no electricity, no running water, living there with my wife, two daughters. And after, this is the mid 70s and 80s, around a campfire, I asked him that, look, I don't want to just come as a tourist. I want to help. So he was very, very cynical. He said, yeah, you Bombay guys are no good. You'll keep doing that, happen many parties. You'll come back next year and you'll ask me, Fateh, what can I do to save the tiger? So admittedly, we had a couple of drinks and I said, I'm never coming back until you tell me. So he fell silent and he said that, look, there are so many useless magazines around, political magazines, film magazines, sports magazines. Where's the wildlife magazine? I had a big problem at that point uttering this, but I did promise him I will never come back until I give you a magazine. And I had no experience, I had no business plan, I had nothing other than that promise. So that was the winter of 1980. And 1981, October, I handed him the first issue of Sanctuary. And quite frankly, everybody, Salim Ali, Sorabji, Kailash Sankla, they all sort of adopted me and said that we're not going to let you fail. You just run this magazine, we have your back. That's how Sanctuary was actually started. It was just a continuum of a love affair.
And in terms of your work with Project Tiger, can you speak about the origins of the project? And we, of course, was very fortunate to see the fantastic film on Project Tiger and your work, because it became such a mass movement and really cemented the idea of conservation. And in a sense, because the tiger is such a majestic creature, I think it really captivated the hearts and minds of people, but also, in terms of the action on the ground and how that's really been a movement in India. How would you describe Project Tiger, how it started, and what were really the effective levers for changing perception?
Again, my shift from just being somebody who loved nature into somebody who started a magazine and things like this. It was Ranthambore. There was a man called Kailash Sankla who was the first director of Project Tiger, and there was just Kailash Sankla, me and Fateh Singh sitting down late at night. Late was 9 o'clock in the evening under a huge banyan tree in Jogi Mahal. They just kept talking between themselves and I was just a fly on the wall. And really what the conversation was that Project Tiger is not just something where you have to save the tiger per se. Yes, we have that as our North Star, but in order to save the tiger, you have to save its ecosystem with all the species, plant and animals that lived inside. So one of the things that was absolutely opened my eyes was when Kailash Sankla said, Bittu, ek baat sun lo, don't count tigers. You are here sitting in Ranthambore, just understand one thing, that when streams that were dry in the month of July, August, September start running, and they start running for October, November, December, January, February, March until the next monsoon, the tigers will come back on their own. He just said a simple thing. What we have to do is to choose different habitats. That was the philosophy of Project Tiger. So different biodiversity vaults, not the ones that had the most tigers, but the ones that were dry deciduous, the ones that were moist deciduous, the ones that were rainforests, or mangroves like the Sundarbans, or the Western Ghats or Arunachal. He said, if you protect that germplasm, जैसे दही जमाने के लिए जामुन चाहिए, वैसे this becomes the germplasm and it'll come back. So it was actually the world's first 2-scale rewilding project. And the one line which stays with me till today is, with nature, if you want it to thrive again, do next to nothing to places and allow nothing to be done there. Nature is self-repairing and it will fix itself. He was laughed at in the early stages. People wanted to plant trees and things like this. But look, within 5 years, 10 years, the whole world accepted that Project Tiger was the world's most successful conservation project.
And what were some of the difficulties you faced? Because clearly there was behavior which was incentivized, if we're looking at poaching. And how were you actually able to shift the needle? Because there are so many vested stakeholders and also profit to be made from tigers. So how were you able to change perception?
It's like this. I was still a kid then. So I was more an observer. And I was a leech. I wouldn't leave these guys. And I could hear from what they said. And then I became one to whom they said that, look, the key thing here is we want an absence of human presence, because nature was absolutely doing splendidly well until Homo sapiens came about. So they went about it by separating humans from the ecosystem and allowed ants and bees and butterflies and birds and monkeys and wild boar to do what they do. They said, this was a word that Fateh Singh used to use, ye hamare van ke mali hai. They are the gardeners of our forest, of our Eden, of our... So the problems were many. I mean, the first problem was that people thought it was their right to kill tigers. I mean, that's what the British did. That's what the Maharajas did. Now we've got independence. Why shouldn't we do it? But then we had the support of a prime minister who viscerally felt that, look, protecting nature is good for human beings, because the connection between nature and water was well known then. And she just made it happen. And then the success story, one led to the next to the next. There were 9 tiger reserves to start with. We have about 50 plus now. And poaching is still a big problem, huge problem. And by the way, poaching is not just somebody putting a snare. Poaching is also somebody who completely wipes out an entire forest. I mean, they're sometimes more dangerous than the poachers, you know. It's a long answer, but I'll cut it short by saying that the greatest difficulty was to convince first the planners. Then the next difficulty was to convince the public. The next difficulty was to convince, or rather coerce, those who were making money by destroying both tigers and tiger habitats. But we managed, didn't we? Now it's 50 years plus. I thought the tiger was dead by the year 2000. We're now in 2024. It's still alive. So I guess we have to accept that we succeeded. But Narika, I can tell you this. I wouldn't consider that to be success, because today the tiger is in the greatest danger, along with the termite and the tick on the back of the tiger. And the greatest threat now is the climate change, the climate crisis, the climate catastrophe that's on us. And we have to work on that together.
No, absolutely. And I think also, this whole discussion on, getting to net zero and our targets being, in a sense, delayed because of the fact that we are industrializing and must be held to a different standard. And, we see even as a corporate, a lot of focus on energy, a lot of focus on carbon, a lot of focus on water and renewable energy, but less so on biodiversity and nature-based solutions. And how would you look at nature-based solutions and biodiversity conversations becoming more mainstream, especially with corporates?
I put it like this, that in a sense, the conversations have become mainstream already. But the action is not mainstream. Everybody expects somebody else to do this, May I be very blunt?
Yes, of course.
Let me put it like this. There's a saying in Hindi, ki laaton ke bhoot baaton se nahi mante, which is to say that there are some people who will only understand with the stick, So now the stick is, let's say, the law at one level. The stick is some kind of protest at another level. But the real stick right now is the impact of climate change. So many things that we are doing. We have I mean, as I say, the sources of life have been turned into the sources of commerce and economics. But nature is fighting back. It does not give us any judgments. Bittu, such a great guy, started a magazine. Narika, such a good person. Look what she's doing. That doesn't do any of that sort. It gives us warnings and then it gives us consequences. So, in a nutshell, that as far as the corporate sector is concerned, environmentalists have done what they have to do. Now it's the economists, it's the insurance sector, it's the scientists, it's the technologists, it's even the politicians. I mean, everybody loves to hate politicians, but the fact is that I would never be able to lead this country. Let's start with insurance. The way that we will go forward, and I can assure you the elasticity of time has gone. So I'm talking 2 years, 3 years, not 20 years, 30 years. We will find that the insurance companies will come back and say, sorry, we cannot insure your road or your project in this part of the Himalaya because landslides and floods and havoc of rivers is going to make your risk uninsurable. So that in itself becomes a break. Now, whether gravity is doing that or the rain is doing that or nature is doing that is one thing. It's certainly not the law. So I think nature is pushing us towards solutions. I've increasingly discovered that the transition from shouting and fighting has shifted to one where you just have to tell the truth without exaggeration, without biases, without, oh, I'm a good guy, you're a bad guy kind of thing. Just tell the truth. Look, there will be no food security. There will be no social security. There will be no health security. There will be no economic security unless we bring that carbon which we've shoved up into the atmosphere back down. And then the next question that is normally asked, so what's the solution? And the solution comes back to nature, that there is no technology known to human beings today that you can put a vacuum cleaner up into the atmosphere and suck all the carbon down. The only way that can be done, America, is to allow ecosystems to come back. Those gardeners of Eden, those maintenance engineers of grasslands, of mangroves, of forests, of lakes, of rivers, of wetlands, of glaciers, those creatures must be given the ability to fix nature because there's a word called homeostasis, which is things coming back to balance. You have a fever, you start sweating, you cool down, you feel cold, you start shivering, you warm down. The whole of nature is self-repairing, and we have to have that faith. That was what religions were born from. The faith that the sun, the river, the sea, the soil, the tree, the bird, all these things were worshipped because life began there, and that was too long an answer. Sorry.
No, it was I think, very important answer because I think even as we look at all your work with Project Tiger and celebration of, a creature who is majestic, larger than life. But then when we have to go down into the ecosystem to, a level of a bee or a sparrow or even the green cover, those are not as inspiring or sexy as the tiger. So how does one captivate people's attention and inspire action at a larger scale when we're looking at maybe smaller parts of the ecosystem that are equally important to promote ecological balance, to help mitigate the disasters caused by climate change? And how do we inspire people to action at a larger scale for maybe smaller parts of the ecosystem that are not as prominent today?
You hit the nail on the head. Why did we choose the tiger? Because it's charisma, it's power, and it's not us. Down the ages, from Tipu Sultan and to so many people, the tiger has always been the best brand in the world for conservation. Of course, the polar bear is a great brand for its own ecosystem. If we can't save the tiger, if we can't save the tiger using the tiger's own charisma and its own power and its own magnetic attraction, then we are very bad communicators and very bad marketing men. And I think that we need to make sure that when we talk about the tiger, we've done that for 20, 30 years. The story we told children is the story I would tell a parliamentarian today. You can't save the tiger if you don't save the forest. When you save the forest, you save every creature in the forest, including the ant on which the tiger has put its paw. And
Right.
when you do that, the forest flourishes. And when the forest flourishes, the rain falls, gets soaked, and goes down into the aquifers. And then when the rain stops, the aquifers continue to feed our rivers. The rivers feed our farms. The farms feed us. Saving the tiger is saving ourselves. Pure logic needs to be used. And I think environmentalists need to take a humility pill for a while. And we guys have to just be there, but we need to leave it to the people who know how to manage economics, engineering, etc. We will have to decommission dams. Many of the dams are really now destroying
Obsolete.
they're destroying the natural economy of a free flowing river. Downstream
Absolutely.
fish are not available to people. Silt is not now any longer going back onto farms the way that it used to, so on and so forth. Essentially, I'd say that the logic process and the self-interest is so obvious now that the finest economists, you take Lord Nicholas Stern from the London School of Economics, the India Observatory, he said 15 years ago, the cost of inaction is going to be vastly greater than the cost of action. Then you have Professor Partha Dasgupta from Cambridge, who said that, look, this pandemic was directly caused by the wildlife trade. It was caused by the destruction of ecosystems. All these species were locked into their own ecosystems like we were outside. Now, when we force them to come into our ecosystem, it's love me, love my dog, or rather, love me, love my virus. So he's saying that protecting the biosphere is good long-term economics. That's his simple message. So I think if we are able to communicate this in a way that is not take your sword out and start fighting, but let's just tell the truth and then hone in on those people who understand that while GDP, it was a wonderful invention, but today, as I see it, GDP is just a word that is used by my generation to colonize the generations yet to be born. So these kind of things, young people, they don't need much motivation. They're running around, but my generation, apart from owing you an apology, my generation needs to wake up and understand that we're in the departure lounge and a touch of humility has to be taken in, and we should be looking to remember ourselves well, be remembered well by our children. And the best motivation is I want to do for my children. I want to do good by them. I want to be remembered well by them. I think those, together with nature's most powerful weapon, will take away the water that we need to do harm. I can explain that later if you want, but essentially, we
Yes,
don't have enough water to do too much more damage. We will be
absolutely.
crippled by nature.
A lot of environmentalists today, and rightly so, have a very strong view. And I think goes back to your point that you put very beautifully, that tell the truth without exaggeration, because a lot of environmentalists today are faulted with over exaggeration or painting a doomsday scenario. And that in and of itself maybe dilutes the position and the message. And I think your guidance to tell the truth without exaggeration, I think, is very powerful and definitely something that has stuck with me. And I think that's very important because today, a lot of the environmentalists, the good work that is being done often gets discredited because for that very reason.
And
And
Narika, why exaggerate as it is? At one level, the magic of reality is wide-eyed fascination. If you just look at anything in nature, you don't have to exaggerate or you don't have to amplify what nature is doing. You just have to be curious and filled with awe and wonder. That's one side of the picture. And on the other side of the picture, everybody talks about what is going to happen. The world will come to an end. There will be fights. There will be this. There will be that. We don't have to articulate that anymore. It's already happening. When you look at Syria, which was the basket That was where people invented agriculture virtually. I believe women invented that while men were going out doing their hunting and gathering and killing mammoths. I mean, it took 4 consecutive droughts coupled with abysmal land management to create a migration out of Syria, which changed the politics of the world. Europe to begin with. Then a number of right-wing people came up, and instead of working together like primates, we are meant to be living in villages and families, supporting each other. It's every man for himself kind of thing. Nature will teach us the right thing to do, but we don't need to exaggerate, and we need to use a four-letter word called hope. And that four-letter word called hope is not empty rhetoric. Hope will come because, like a cut on your hand or a headache, the body knows how to do, and the world knows how to do. The biosphere knows how to fix itself, and it does. When we had the pandemic, the skies were blue again. Yeah. Rivers ran pure again. For a while. All we did was we stopped abusing these ecosystems, which were really our nurseries for us, for our own lives. So I think I am hopeful for tomorrow, and I want my children not to grow up as cynics, but that lesson, Kids for Tigers, the program that we run, which goes out to 1 million kids across the country, the one lesson that educationists taught us was that kids don't do what you tell them to do, the kids do what you do. So we've got to set a good example, and I think between setting a good example and observing the way nature fixes itself, we will improve our economy, we will improve our health, we will improve our relationship with other people, whether it's your neighbor or whether it's another country. And what a beautiful adventure lies ahead for our children. They're going to watch every passing day because they will not make the mistakes that we have made in the last 200, 300 years. I think we're going to see a future filled with hope. Partly ek do thappad milenge, and partly the magic of knowing कि अरे देखो हमने कुछ किया भी नहीं और फिर भी ये ठीक हो गया. We never saved the tiger saved itself. We just stopped harming nature, that's all.
Because it's interesting you brought up the pandemic, and I think it was quite a unanimous reaction that after being locked down for over 2 years, everybody's reaction was nature's flourishing. It's so wonderful to see the blue skies, to see leopards walking in the streets, to see monkeys. But also equally tragic was maybe the short term or maybe amnesia in a manner of speaking, that we're very easily able to dissociate from that learning and that understanding and kind of go back to our old ways. And how do you think innovation and technology can maybe help us to have a better memory, and not, in a sense, with this digital world also has, so many things thrown at you. Also, the attention span is reduced. So how do we really use technology, or do you think we can use technology and digital to help people have more of a long-term memory? Or do you think it's actually hurting us?
No, it's not hurting us. What we are suffering from now is ecological amnesia, that we see something we did, it had an ill effect, it's caused us to be traumatized, hurt. Then as time passes, like the pandemic passed, we forgot and we start making the same mistakes again. It could be human nature, but I don't think it's human nature. Eventually, human nature is such that think about it. Just think about it. If you talk in terms of 200-300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, what are the names? At least to me, what comes to mind is Aristotle at one level. You think about, the artists, the painters, the poets, the thinkers, the people who, I wouldn't call them peaceniks, but the people who actually worshipped nature and learned how to express it, they will become our heroes. And I think that if we have to go ahead, then two things. We have to tell truth without malice, and we have to remember the past, go back to the past to negotiate our future. We have everything going for us. I see no reason to despair, but at this particular moment in time, in this particular little pixel of history that we're living in, I think things will change. I think we'll find ourselves where people like you, who have the heart and the head in sync, will be the major players. And those people who go around with a crowbar knocking down statues and slicing paintings in what is this beautiful, beautiful gallery that we live in, which is called Planet Earth, they won't be our heroes anymore. And if I may add one last thing from my side, there's too much testosterone floating around. Men have been in charge for far too long. It's not that men are bad. It's just that men imagine that they have to demonstrate their power. I can be bigger, I can be faster, I can be taller, I am stronger. Darwin said it so long ago. It's not the strongest, it's not the most intelligent, it's the most adaptable that will survive. If we adapt, we will survive. If we don't, we'll be taught a lesson. And to my 10-year-olds, I quietly tell them with a lot of love that nature is asking us to kneel in prayer. Tomorrow, if we don't listen, it will ask us to kneel in subjugation. They understand. And they tell me, Bittu uncle, don't worry. Everything will be all right. Don't worry. We'll take care of the world. I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister. He wrote back and he loves tigers. Everything will be all right. I love the lack of cynicism. And I think we'll be all right. I really do think we'll be all right. But it's going to be painful if my generation continues to assault the only thing that gives us life.
To uncle, who inspires you to live your purpose?
God. Can I get personal?
Absolutely.
Vijay, your dad, and I spoke about this around 1983, 84. And I'd gone to him and I'd said that, look, I want to make these films on Project Tiger. So the first thing he said was, look, for God's sake, please don't give us that the world is coming to an end thing. Let's not aim the films to just the adults. Let's aim them at children, because an intelligent 10-year-old, if you can communicate with him, probably the adults will be able to understand. So we produced 30 films together in the 1980s. So yeah, it was Project Tiger and it was Rakshak and it was so many things. And we had hope. By then, the world was talking about Project Tiger and we were talking about how nature gives back and how all the love and respect and religions, every religion was born from nature, every single last religion. Every music, every dance, every philosophy, every thought, every poem. At one time or another, if you go back, whether it's Rabindranath Tagore or whether it's Wordsworth or anybody, they lived at an age when it was easier to fall in love with nature. Right now, I think we imagine we are the gods we've invented, and nature will teach us. I never gave you a straight answer to exactly what you asked.
No, but I fondly remember Rakshak and, all of the episodes and how it really brought the topic to life. And I was actually sad because I was looking for episodes to show the kids, but I was unable to find it anywhere. You don't
they
have them
all
recorded.
got destroyed by, we shot them on 16 mm. We kept the sound negative separate. We kept everything. And they got destroyed because from the roof above us, the person had a leak and we had tons of water pouring down in our little storage room. And
oh no!
At that time, digitizing it wasn't that easy. I am still trying to see somewhere in Doordarshan, which put all the 30 films up, whether they have the U-matic tapes. At least we can get some part of it. They're not the best films when you talk in terms of Attenborough and things like this, but they're the history of Project Tiger and wildlife of the 80s, which I think was a turning point.
Yeah, absolutely.
I miss Vijay.
I know.
Hmm.
But I think that even Doordarshan wouldn't have kept any copies, or it was just aired and then they didn't keep any copies.
Nyrika, they would probably somewhere keep a copy. I'll tell you, around the same time, I did 12 hours of interviews with Dr. Salim Ali, who was like a North Star for me also.
Yes.
And for 10 years, I kept saying to them that, look, please, let's put those interviews out. This is oral history. We must have it. Nobody responded. Then I think it was about a year ago. Suddenly, I got a call from Tara Gandhi, who said,
Okay.
hey, when did you do these interviews? I just saw them on the internet. So there
Oh,
was,
really?
yeah, but they only put out about 2 hours or 1.5 hours of those interviews. And all this other magic from this wonderful old man, Dr. Salim Ali, the founder of the
Hmm.
Bombay Natural History Society, are still lying.
What an
With,
incredible man.
but why isn't it out? I mean, why isn't it out?
And none of the archives would have it?
They will have it, but I know that the interviews that we did with Dr. Salim Ali are there, but these, I don't know. I've contacted every information and broadcasting minister that was ever appointed, and I haven't been able to get even a response from them.
Such a pity, because these, as you rightly said, remember the past to negotiate the future. And I think these stories and first-hand accounts are such a powerful tool for inspiration and action. And it's a shame that we've lost them. But maybe the internet and its vast resources of data, maybe it's available somewhere, and maybe we can search the archives and look for stories like this, which really inspire. Especially, I know I'm fascinated by the stories, and even when I read to my kids, there's definitely Salim Ali is. We have a few books on him, and they thoroughly enjoy. Especially my daughter Ariane loves
Yeah.
reading.
Oh Lord. I keep thinking of Sorabji, I keep thinking of Salim Ali, and I keep thinking of the fact that how much hope we had those days. I think if they were still here with us and at their prime, I think they would be able to actually inspire the world to fight the climate crisis the way it should be fought, which is by going into what we call nature-based solutions. Doesn't fully do the trick, you know. It's basically letting nature do what it does and look upon it as the ultimate asset, economic asset, social asset, food security asset, happiness asset, health asset, everything. You are going to see within your lifetime a return to the worship of nature as a life giver. I promise you. Right now, across the world, this is not just India. If India, in fact, has so much latent reverence for nature that we probably will have to seed the world, and like us, a few other communities that exist around, particularly the tribal communities that exist in different parts of the world. We'll have to seed people with hope, and we'll have to seed people with a respect for nature. The moment we start respecting it, we will start protecting it. When we protect it, it will protect us.
Absolutely. I was
Believe?
really interested to know an author that you love or a book that has inspired you, and for also all our listeners.
Oh,
A
look,
good book is always important to have.
well, my wife Madhu tells me that there are more books in our house and in our library than there is space. So my table as I speak is filled with books and things. But you know, it's difficult to read him. But Darwin,
Mhm.
I mean, he writes in this style which was very what you might call old fashioned today, but he wrote the truth. And I learned a lot from Darwin. So if you ask me my favorite author, I would still say Darwin. He taught me to ignore what people say or think, analyze every fact before arriving at my conclusions. And that one liner, it's not the strongest or the most intelligent that survives, it's the most adaptable. That's guided my life, actually, you know. But there are many, many, many other authors. I read like a lunatic. I can be lost in books.
And what's your favorite go-to spot in India?
It's like asking who's your favorite child, you know. But I'd say two places jump straight to mind. One is Ranthambore. I mean, for 15 years, me, my wife, Madhu, and my daughter, Sarah Miel, that was our home. We used to leave part our clothes there and, you know, travel light and go to Ranthambore, hop a train. So Ranthambore is one place which is still a favorite, but it's changed. And I now
Yeah.
tend to go not so much inside the park, but outside the park, where we are trying to expand the park, you know, to make sure that the local people living around it. So anyway, Ranthambore is one. The other is Dachigam in Kashmir. There's a river called the Dagwan. I have never gone to Dachigam without lying down at the edge of that river and drinking from that beautiful Dagwan river. Of course, the left side of my cheek, if I'm on the right bank. So I can't feel it for about a couple of minutes because it's glacial water. But look, forests, water, Dachigam, beautiful, unbelievable. It was protected by Maharaja Hari Singh and Karan Singh, his son. And now every Kashmiri is proud of that place. And I love Kashmir. It is my home too. So yes, one is a hot, arid place. One is a beautiful Himalayan heaven. Both heavens. Lovely. I love too many other places, but I won't go into them.
Thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing your thoughts and for really inspiring us. And thank you for being the change we want to see in the world.
Oh, you are so sweet. Thank you very much. It's an opportunity. And I'll tell you this, you will not escape me. I will be there. I will remind you. I will walk with you. I will do everything that we have to do to leave a better world for your children and their children.
Thank you very much, Bittu Uncle, for inspiring our colleagues with your work and your life experience. And to our listeners, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Be All You Can. We would love to hear your suggestions on speakers for the podcast. Please do drop us a mail on corpcom@godrej.com with a story that inspires you, and we would love to take it on in our next episode. Till next time, stay inspired, follow your purpose, dream big, and be all you can. And remember the 3 thoughts that Bittu's session with us today. Remember the past to negotiate the future. Tell the truth without exaggeration and without malice. And remember that it's not the strongest who will survive, but the most adaptable.